Crossroads of Time. The Battalion Tactical Group moved through the dense forest, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Sweet plastered uniforms to backs, each step a heavy thud against the mossy ground. Then, as suddenly as a curtain being drawn, they reached the tree line. An open field stretched before them, but it was a scene ripped from a different season, a different world. Snow. Drifts of it lay pristine and untouched, reflecting the summer sun with an almost blinding glare. The men stopped, disbelief etched on their faces. "What the hell?" A muttered Private Morozov, wiping sweat from his brow that instantly turned cold. Their bewilderment deepened as they saw him, a stooped figure emerging from the far side of the field. An old man clad in a thick sheepskin coat that looked 100 years old, patched linen trousers, and woven bast shoes lapped. He looked like he'd stepped right out of a museum exhibit. The old man spotted them and his eyes widened with terror. He let out a high-pitched shriek, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the field, and fled back into the forest, crossing himself in a frantic, chaotic way. He didn't just cross himself once or twice, but repeatedly, almost as if warding off the devil himself. Captain Dimov, a stocky man with a weathered face and the air of someone who'd seen too much, barked an order. "Let's move. Stay sharp." They advanced cautiously, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The field gave way to a clearing, and in the center stood a village, or what was left of it. The structures were nothing but charred skeletons, blackened timbers reaching into the sky like accusing fingers. The air reeked of ash and the acrid tang of burnt meat. Had there been a fire? Recently? But the real horror lay on the ground. Dozens of figures were scattered across the snow, men, women, and children, all dressed in what appeared to be ancient clothing. They lay still, their faces frozen in expressions of agony. "Mannequins." Sergeant Roshin breathed, his voice thick with unease. "Are they shooting a historical movie or something?" Dimov surveyed the scene, his expression tightening. "No cameras," he said, his voice low. "It could be some kind of training exercise gone wrong. Keep your distance until we understand what's going on." As they moved closer, the unsettling details multiplied. The mannequins were coated in thick, crimson paint. Many were headless. Roshin, his curiosity piqued, cautiously approached one of the children, lying face down in the snow. He nudged it with his boot, then, with a grunt, flipped it over. The child was disturbingly lifelike. Then, with a jolt that sent a wave of nausea through Roshin, the eyes fluttered open. The boy, no older than 7, stared up at him with wide, terrified eyes. He mumbled something unintelligible, a pathetic whimper escaping his lips, and then began to cry, silent tears freezing on his cheeks. "Captain!" a Russian yelled, his voice cracking. "These are real people. They're alive?" Before Dimov could react, a new sound cut through the silence, the thundering of hooves. From the edge of the tree line, 3 riders emerged. They were mounted on small, sturdy horses. Their appearance as jarring as the snow in summer. They looked like Tartars, straight out of a history book. They were clad in crude chainmail, their faces obscured by leather helmets. Each carried a curved saber at his side, a bow slung across his back. They sat their horses, observing the soldiers with cold, assessing eyes. Dimov, never one to back down from a confrontation, stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice echoing in the silent clearing. "We mean you no harm." One of the riders let out a guttural yell, shattering the fragile truce. He drew his saber with a swift, practiced motion, the steel flashing in the sun. In a heartbeat, he charged. Dimov barely had time to register the attack. The saber cleaved through the air and struck, decapitating the captain with brutal efficiency. His head tumbled into the snow, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. Simultaneously, the second rider unslung a lasso and expertly cast it towards Private Ryabov, who stood frozen in shock. The rope snaked through the air and tightened around Ryabov's neck. The Tartar rider spurred his horse, dragging the struggling soldier across the snow. He grinned, a savage, animalistic expression splitting his face. Pandemonium erupted. The remaining soldiers, jolted from their stupor, opened fire. Rifles cracked, rounds zipping through the air. Two of the Tartar riders crumpled to the ground, their horses rearing in panic. The third, however, escaped, disappearing back into the forest with a blood-curdling war cry. "What the hell is going on?" A Russian screamed, frantically reloading his weapon. "Oh, where are we?" As if in answer, a new threat emerged. From the top of a low rise in the distance, a vast horde of horsemen appeared. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of riders stretched across the horizon, their numbers seemingly endless. It looked like at least 3 divisions, converging on their position. With a deafening roar, the horde charged, a wave of horseflesh and steel. Arrows rained down upon the trapped soldiers, finding their mark with sickening thuds. Several men cried out, clutching at wounds. The soldiers returned fire, the staccato bursts of their rifles and the thunderous roar of the Bur's autocannons tearing through the air. Tanks joined the fray, their cannons blasting away at the advancing riders. The ranks of the attackers thinned, horses and riders alike sent sprawling to the ground in bloody heaps. But the sheer number of the attackers was overwhelming. The surviving Tartars, undeterred, continued their charge, their bows drawn, their sabers raised. Then a new sound filled the air, the sound of more horses. Riders emerged from the forest behind them, cutting off their retreat. These riders, however, were different. They saw the dead Tartars on the ground and let out a cheer. They were dressed in similar but cleaner armaments. They spoke in a language that sounded familiar yet ancient. Russian. A Russian shouted, relief flooding through him. "They are Russian." After a tense negotiation, they found a way to communicate. The newcomers identified themselves as soldiers of Ryazan, led by Prince Fedor Yurievich. The Tartars, they explained, were an advance force of the Golden Horde, on their way to sack and burn Ryazan. Prince Fedor Yurievich's face was etched with sorrow and grim determination. He knew that his city, his people, were hopelessly outnumbered. "They're all going to be slaughtered," a Russian whispered to Lieutenant Snigarev, horror dawning on his face. Snigarev, a pragmatic officer with a keen tactical mind, shook his head. "Not necessarily," he said, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "We have the weapons. We have the training. We can help them." And so an unlikely alliance was forged, a bridge across time. The soldiers of the 21st century, armed with modern weaponry, stood shoulder to shoulder with the warriors of 13th century Rus, united against a common enemy. The battle was joined. The modern weaponry of the Bed proved to be devastatingly effective. The Tartars, accustomed to fighting lightly armed opponents, were mowed down by rifle fire and decimated by the tanks. The tide turned. The Tartars, accustomed to easy victories, faltered. Fear gripped them. They broke ranks and fled, scattering across the steppe, leaving a trail of corpses and broken equipment in their wake. The rout was complete. In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the dust settled, the impossible had happened. The Tartar invasion of Rus had been averted. History had been rewritten. Colonel Izadov, the highest-ranking officer present, was hailed as a hero, a savior. The Ryazan people, overwhelmed with gratitude, proclaimed him their grand prince. "He's the one who can unite them all," Roshin murmured, awestruck. "He's the one who can keep them from tearing each other apart." The future of Rus was uncertain, but one thing was clear: it would be a future forged in the crucible of battle, a future shaped by the clash of two worlds. The soldiers of the 21st century had stumbled into the past, and in doing so they had changed the course of history forever. This new history of the country, what will it be? Only time will tell.